All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hi, I can see you. So this is going to be recorded. I'm going to go ahead and flip this screen and kind of share my screen with you so that I can get started. Let's see. Oops. Oops, wrong slide. How was work? Work okay? All right. All right, so this is the Rowdy Rover online group class webinar, and it is going to be recorded. Let's see, let me make sure I am recording. Give me 1 second. So I just got done, Julie is sick today, so I'm having to do both back to back, so some of it's going to be a little redundant. I'm going to mute everyone else, but I'm going to basically go through this webinar. If you have any questions, you can type them up, and then I'm going to try to address them at the very end. If we run out of time, then I'll go ahead and put together a list of the questions and try to answer them a little bit later. Let's see. Oops. Oh my God, go backwards, get back. Okay, so the class is gonna run for about 50 minutes. And this class is gonna be run every week, same time. We'll have I think it has the same Zoom ID number. We'll try to be able to record it if I can figure out how to record it. And then we're going to have a link on Facebook or have a link on YouTube where you can listen, watch it a little bit later. So what you should expect to learn is kind of the why and how we do some of our training. Obviously, you're not practicing with your own dog, so you're really able to absorb this a lot more. We found out that like by teaching in the class, when people are actually doing class, the studies show that only 7% is actually absorbed. So it's a lot easier to do a platform this way. We still have class on Saturdays, whether you're doing the manners class or the Rowdy Rover. So this is when you go to class, you're just going to be able to practice some of your skills. So today we're going to talk about the training environment, kind of like how to watch your back. We've got some brain games, which I know you guys have used before. I've done in some privates with you. We talk about the box and some other do-it-yourself enrichment. We're going to talk about breed-specific play, so it kind of gets your wheels turning, and then you can kind of take a look at maybe what you're doing for play and maybe change it up. I have a great video on introducing the muzzle. We have some dogs that have gone past the point of meeting a stuffed dog. So before they go into, integrating into close proximity with another dog, there is that other step of having a muzzle on, just another precaution. We're going to talk about a little bit about socialization and exposure to new. We've got a great video that we shot a little bit earlier on how to expose dogs to things that are new in the environment. Problem prevention, we're going to talk about behavior mod of counter surfing. Some of you dogs have been counter surfing, so this is a way to understand how to fix it. And then we're going to go over what we call the bucket game. And I'm super excited about this because a lot of people don't use the bucket game, and it's such a fun way to teach your dog how to enjoy getting their nails done or their ears cleaned. Or if you have a doodle, how to brush their hair. We're going to go over the importance of clicker training, and then the behavior that we're going to focus on is the loose leash walking. So those of you that are doing behavior adjustment training in our Rowdy Rover class, you understand the mechanics of the leash skills. We've gone over a little bit about body language, the gradual prompts, and the mark and move. So in this class today, I wanted to focus on understanding the environment. So you have, if you're working by yourself with your dog, it's really hard to watch, you know, what's in front of you to the left and the right. So at this level, when you're still learning your leash skills, I'd like you to have a helper. So if you're a two-person team and you're working in your neighborhood, one person is staring at their dog the whole time, and then the other person is like slightly behind. They're not, you know, out in front leading the dog in a different direction. They're slightly behind, and what their job is to do is just kind of watch the environment for you. It takes a lot of practice to do leash skills and watch the environment and react in time and like mark and move. It really does take a lot to be able to take this into the neighborhood. So until then, I highly recommend going two-person team if you're in the neighborhood, or trying to drive somewhere before you go. So let me see. We do this form of training for puppies, but we let them go and explore, and then the world isn't so interesting anymore, and then they come back to their humans and they want to train. We recommend doing long leash and relaxed leash training at the very beginning before they do loose leash walking, you know, before they do obedience, so that the dog can explore and say, hey, you know what, it's not really that big of a deal. Let me go see what's going on back there. So we have a program that we call puppy empowerment training, which is basically a lot like B.A.T, but we add less rules. So there's a few people having a problem getting onto the link. So I'm gonna share the link for 1 second. So I'm gonna pause to share. Let's see, let me do an invite. Copy URL, give me 1 second. Let's see if that works. Okay. Remember, if you have any questions, saying that they can't, okay. Anyways, I'll resume share and we'll go back to play. If you have any questions, you can go over to your little notes and text them, and I'll kind of look at them a little bit later. All right, so when we talked about the real world just a little earlier and how you want to make sure you're watching the back, in order for you to get to the level of training where your dog is able to go on Ocean Boulevard, 2nd Street, Main Street, there's so many different steps, and I want to go over them with you. So we first start off with training a new behavior in the backyard, front yard, or in the house. First of all, in the house, or where they feel most comfortable. Then it's front yard, backyard, and then maybe it's 1 or 2 houses down before we go to a park. After we teach a behavior and they're able to do it at a park, then we might do it at a park where there's a dog park far away. At that level, then we might introduce like going into Home Depot or the parking lot of Home Depot before we go into something like Marshall, where there's a lot more people and there's a lot more like different things. So there are maybe 6, 7, 8 different levels of environmental training that you need to get to before you can take your dog out on a very, very busy area. One of our golden retrievers, we had them at Cerritos Mall. We've done South Coast Plaza. I've done Costco with the dog that was a service animal in training. To get there, you've got to spend a lot of time doing the other levels of training with each of your behaviors, so that the environment that's new isn't making your dog so stressed out. So it's just important to understand those steps. So when you're teaching a brand new behavior, whatever it is, you still have to then not test it. Then you want to take that behavior and do it in the front yard, do it in the backyard, do it 2 houses down, do it at a park, do it at a park with dogs on another fence, before you just say, well, my dog doesn't recall. when we're at the beach, right? So mental and physical exercise is highly important. Before you even begin thinking of going to go train your dog, the dog has to come down a notch, even if they're a puppy. If you've got a dog that's a breed that's, you know, has a lot of energy, super smart and active, you're going to want to take them down a notch so that they can actually listen to you and learn. So mental and physical exercise is really, really important to get your dog to be themselves. So implementing daily mental breed-specific physical exercise is super important because it makes them feel like they can come down a notch. They've done their job. Now, where you do it, so if you're trying to expose your dog to a new environment, so let's say you've been doing all the training in the front yard and now you're ready to move 2 houses down, that might be the place that you introduce a new interactive feeder, whatever it is, to expose them to a new environment safely, and they like it, then they're more likely to want to begin training. For a new puppy that we had this morning, the dog was kind of afraid of their crate. So what we did is we took their playtime and we did it in front of their crate. So we were exposing the crate in the area with play. Now, the type of interactive feeders and physical exercise you do should be based on your dog's specific breed, what you plan on doing with your dog. So if your dog is going to be a diabetic alert dog where they need to use their nose, then a lot of the stuff has to do with sniffing, right? Really strengthening their nose. And if they're uneasy about being in certain rooms, like they don't feel comfortable being in the bedroom, but they're only good in the living room, that might be, you know, an area where you start giving them that interactive feeding to make them comfortable in that room. So here is a do-it-yourself interactive feeder that we have used with a lot of our personal clients. This is the burrito. It's really easy. What I like about it is super easy. It's easy to do, and it keeps the dog in one place. So it's not messy. And you can make this super easy, or you can make it really hard. So let me fast forward it. So here we have Julie. She's doing kibble, but she's also doing a combination of high reinforcement treats. She's making this really, really thin. That makes it harder. So for today, we had a dog that was, you know, a young puppy, 8 weeks old. We just folded it one time and gave it to the dog. The dog was still like, what is this? We want to see, then you want to almost take notes. Did the dog use their nose, their paw, or their teeth, or another body part? What did they do with this interactive feeder? And we can scale it up or down based on the performance that we got from this dog. So let's say you want the dog to learn to use their nose. You're going to put something like that, like the little burrito, someplace where it's not able to move a lot, and so they have to use their nose. If you want to teach them to use their teeth, you might put it in a bowl where they have to use their teeth to take it out. So in this next one, the Muffin Tin, which is usually, if we made it easy, we would just put different types of food and treats right here. To make it more challenging, you're going to place things on top. And this is what Julie does here for both the dogs. So she's using different types of balls and toys. Here's one cool thing about doing something with toys. If your dog goes absolutely crazy for squeaker balls, by using a lot of squeaker balls, you begin to desensitize squeaker balls, and then they're not so powerful anymore. So if your dog goes absolutely crazy over a certain toy and you want them to come down a notch, you can just have a lot of them and then start to use them for something like this. So she's putting different things. Now the things with little handles on them, like this elephant and this squirrel, the dog's going to easily be able to just move it with their nose. But that tennis ball and this blue ball is going to be a lot harder, so they're going to have to use their teeth to pick it up to get what's underneath. So right there, if I was trying to challenge a dog, I would put the highest reinforcement right there. And this was funny because Cooper actually just took one treat, took a toy, and then took off. So you can make this as easy or as hard as you want. Just give you some ideas and get your brain thinking. So if you place this in a room where your dog's not as comfortable with, this would change their mind about that room. All right. Okay, so here's the box game that I have done with Natasha before. I love this because it exposes them to something that they're gonna see anyway, so they're not overreactive to a box. Almost everybody orders Amazon, right? Now we had about 10 different types of boxes. We had the tall, skinny, we had the shoe box, which just goes down, and then we've got the ones with the flaps. So you first want to start off with just presenting the box totally open and then adding one flap at a time. So one flap, give it to them, they're successful. Then you can go to 2, 3, and 4. So you don't want to just give them a box and completely close it up and say good luck. If you've got multiple dogs, if there's any resource guarding, you do want to make sure they're separated. But this is a great way to expose dogs that are in the same household to kind of share, right? And here we have Bentley actually knocking it all the way over. So what she did here at the very end is she put something over it. I think with Natasha, I put like a skateboard and another platform and then something else. And that made it really hard. And it made them have to think, how in the world do I get in there? So that makes them problem solve, which is important for our service animal dogs. They need to be able to find their handler. They've got to figure out how to open a door. They got to figure out how to bark and alert that, hey, I need to go alert my handler. So breed specific, every dog is bred to do something. Some dogs bred to sniff. In this case, we're using a flirt pole to teach impulse control. This dog loves, loves, loves to chase. So she's gonna chase the squirrel. Once she catches the squirrel, then she has to drop the squirrel. You'll notice at the beginning that we did have her sit first. Now this was a long one. We normally are really short and sweet at the beginning for little dogs to get them interested in this. I would have let them catch it much earlier, but she's having to sit and really control her ability or want, a desire to actually chase. If you have a herding dog, a prey drive dog, a terrier of some kind, they cannot resist their gut saying, oh my gosh, is that a mouse? Is that a squirrel? So this is a great way to give them breed specific play. And then you can teach things like drop, take, hold, get, fetch, and impulse control. Highly recommend being creative with the way that you play. So management is the key to all unwanted behaviors. In some cases, when a client comes to me and they're like, I really can't afford training, I just go over a management plan. So I just wanted you to think about this. If you said to me, you know, my dog keeps counter surfing every time I leave the house, I'm gonna say, well, it's much easier if you're not home to block off the area that they're counter surfing so they can't practice it, and then it goes away. Or you can train train an alternative behavior, which you're going to see me do later on when we talk about counter surfing. So any behavior that you're having problems with, you have to start by implementing a management so that it can't happen. When we have a dog that has a bite history and the goal is to get them to be able to be in the same room with another dog, management would mean we have to muzzle train that dog at some point. Like at first we might put up a gate, an X-pen, a crate, something that blocks them completely, but there'll be a point where those things are removed and we can rely on the leash. But before we go from the leash to just dog on dog, we would use a muzzle. Our steps for behavior modification is we normally do all the training with we're just talking specifically about 2 dogs. We'll train in the home, then we'll go out in the yard, and then the dog will be exposed to a new dog at a distance. Then we have them use a stuffed dog because we want to see their skills with the stuffed dog. Then we go into muzzle training, and then we remove the muzzle. So this is a case study. This is a dog that we worked with for 4 months. His name is Buddha, and he had a bite history. Can't remember, is it he? Buddha is a she. Buddha was a she. And Tucker is a female puppy, a male puppy that we were working with. So it was a older dog with a bite history and a brand new puppy, and they wanted to be in the same home. So we constantly brought Tucker in a crate, and then we did training with Buddha. So Tucker is getting treated for just being in the crate, and Buddha is actually learning settle, look at me, like is learning some of the basic skills instead of fighting, which is what is been the go-to for her. So here she is, oops. Here she is, we're protecting Tucker. Gosh, we're protecting Tucker by putting him in this crate, and Buddha is okay with it because she's being reinforced with food. So she looked at Tucker and she looked at us, and we're reinforcing some good behavior. We're training. Now this took a few weeks to get here, but you can see her body's a lot more relaxed and she's been okay with it. Now the next step after this is that we ended up muzzle training Buddha, and then we put them into 2 rooms, and we were able to do some training next to each other while she was muzzle trained. And the muzzle came off for this dog after 4 months, and they now live in the home together. So it took 4 months of 3 times a week of implementing this whole plan. It can happen even with a dog with a bite history, but it does take some systematic work. So muzzle training, it's used to prevent lots of unwanted behavior. We had a border collie we were working with that was chewing on rocks. So 2 or 3, vet visits at $2,000 a piece. This was the solution to not having him chew rocks. So how to muzzle train? We do it like how we do almost everything when we're exposing. First, we make sure we're looking and listening to the dog. We're going to use a reward-based training, so we're going to present the muzzle. If the dog shows any interest, even looks at it, we're going to mark, we remove the muzzle, and then we give food. So we're basically saying, hey, thank you very much for looking at that muzzle. And then the muzzle, what we expect gets greater and greater. So this is Poppy and Laura, and I'm going to let you watch this video. It's pretty self-explanatory. So now we're clicking for movement towards the muzzle. So she's clicking the moment the head moves towards there, and she's delaying the click as it gets further and further in. This is the very second step to muzzle training. And then after that, we start to delay the click and get a little more duration, so more time in the muzzle. And then the treat placement, we're now feeding through the holes of the muzzle. And to add more duration, we used a spoon and something that takes longer to eat. In this case, Poppy likes peanut butter. And we're using a muzzle for Poppy because she's showing some reactive behavior towards young puppies. So we want to, be careful with them, but we also want to make sure that we can change or modify her behavior with exposure to puppies. So if Poppy pulls out at any time, we remove the muzzle. Once we get duration, we add the straps. So we need her to keep her mouth in so that we can add the strap. So we now put the licky reinforcement, in this case, peanut butter. We don't strap it all the way. We just let her get used to having something along her forehead and her ears, I guess. And now that, because the peanut butter is the highest reinforcement to her, now we can actually strap the muzzle on. And now we add a little more duration with the straps on. So keeping the strap on, we then begin feeding more and doing more training. So as soon as she stops licking, we give again. So we just reinforce. Now she's okay with the muzzle being on because she's getting a pretty high reinforcement. And when we do muzzle training, we pick a high reinforcement and we only use it for this particular training, right? For this. So then once we get the muzzle on, we begin training. We begin adding, training with something that the dog likes to do. We'll still use the high rate of reinforcement, like, the peanut butter in this case, or you can just feed more frequently. So if a dog normally isn't being treated for a sit, we're going to go ahead and treat all the really easy things for this dog to enjoy having the muzzle on. And the very next step that I don't have on here, so this dog goes through a lot of training by herself, is we then start to add other dogs with the muzzle on, training next to, and then she goes to play with the muzzle on, and then lastly, we can remove the muzzle. So those are the steps to our muzzle training program. We do it for quite a few dogs that we can implement, that we can rehabilitate if they have a history of biting. This is what we do. This is how we help the owners kind of feel safe with where their dog is at. So again, if you have any questions, you can press chat and I can try to answer them a little bit later. Okay. Some dogs that are experiencing reactive behavior have missed something in their earlier socialization experience, whether it's dogs, people, sounds, smells, something new, or touch. It's important to try to find out what that is. Exposure to new things is something that we like to do really early on with puppies. If you find that there's something that your dog is weary of, like teenage boys or something, then we want to go through the steps the same way with all of their triggers. One at a time, and usually by the second or third object or trigger, they start to go, oh yeah, I know this game. We want to change their mind, because normally they're reacting because they're feeling like things are just not safe anymore, and they're reacting because no one's listening. So it's important for us to read that body language and go, okay, I understand you need a little space. So this video is called exposure to things that are new. Now we do this with puppies, but if you are having, so like Natasha will sometimes be fearful of something going on in the room and new sounds, I highly recommend implementing something like this right away. To do it, you're going to basically, when the dog is not looking at you and they're relaxing or eating, you're going to lay a very soft sound at first, and you're going to increment it a little bit more challenging or a little louder each time. So Cooper's here laying down, playing with this ball, and then Julie drops a disc on a, I guess it's a, what is that called? A big pillow. What is that thing called? I forgot. But anyways, it's very soft. And then we went into a cup, a plastic cup, and he could care less. Well, then we went to the book and he kind of looked, and she goes, what was that? And then there she did it a very much louder drop from here. And when he wasn't looking, so he was surprised. And the cue that we use for this, so if the dog does look up at you, we have a little thing that we play and we teach that's called What Was That? And it's when they hear a loud noise and they look at you and you go, what was that? And then we mark yes, and then we reward. And it becomes a fun game that you can play. So in this case, we did a book. Then we did a plate, a glass plate, which always happens. You would do your utensils, you would do pots and pans, and then you would kind of progress from there. The other thing that dogs don't like that are, you know, sometimes not inclined to enjoy is change. So with our puppies, we tell the owners constantly move the furniture, drop things that weren't supposed to be there, and get them used to change. For an older dog that is already showing signs of like, oh my God, things have changed. Oh no, what am I gonna do? You would do this in a smaller scale. How we teach this or how we implement this is we bring the dog out of the room. We change up the furniture a little bit at a time. In this case, I took a broom and a vacuum cleaner, laid it on the floor, and then I sprinkled some of the dog's kibbles, and then I let them back into the room. Exposing them to a new room with new things just teaches them, especially if you incorporate their meal time. Oh, wow, it's not so bad, right? Highly recommend that if your dog has some signs of fear and change, this is a great way to make change more enjoyable and not so bad. Here's a list of what we try to expose and socialize dogs with. If you need a PDF of this, if you notice that there's something on there, we've got training for elevators, training for manholes, you know, wet grass, balloons. So if you find that your dog is fearful of something that might be on this list, or if you'd like a PDF of this list, just shout out and we'll go ahead and share it. Dogs are pretty easy creatures. If they are reinforced for behavior that you like, they're going to probably repeat that behavior. So when it comes to training, we like to use the clicker. The reason I like to use the clicker for training, it's very, very precise. When I typically will work with a client on coaching, and I'll say, okay, you know, I really like to use the clicker, and maybe they don't have the mechanics or they just don't want to carry around a clicker. They want to do a verbal marker. I'll say, okay, let's come up with a verbal marker that we can all use. It's just so, like, we'll start off with using the word like yes or good boy, and by the time it gets to the third or fourth person, it's completely different. So it's just not consistent. Where clicker is very consistent when it's paired with food, the dog automatically, you know, will learn, you know, once it's been paired that, hey, I've done it, okay, you know, pay me. It's precise, and you can really move a dog along a lot faster than using a verbal marker. So we use the clicker for teaching brand new behaviors. The timing is very crucial, so there is a lot of ways to practice your mechanics. I have here just a short video again on loose leash walking. I'll have this in a link that if you'd like to learn more, like how much faster on how to clicker train loose leash walking, we can definitely share this with you, but it's the same like 6, 7, 8 steps. When you're training your dog to walk on the left-hand side, you're going to put your treat placement on that left-hand side, on your left hip, kind of behind you, and you're going to use this same side hand to treat. So if your dog is walking on your left, you're going to be using your left hand to treat. We'll go through the steps again, but step 1, you're going to click for loose leash. Step 2, you're going to delay. Once they've, walking loose leash pretty well and you've done a lot of repetitions, you're going to just hold off and click the moment that they look at you. Notice where you pay your dog is going to teach your dog, hey, hang out right here. I pay really good if you hang out right here. So they just begin hanging there because that's where they've always been getting paid. So try to refrain from reaching out to pay your dog. Instead, pay them where you want them to be. They'll come and find it. You'll want to scale up and down on the different levels based on where your dog is at. So if your dog's not offering you eye contact, you're going to go back to level 1. If your dog's offering you eye contact a lot, you're going to want to go ahead and go over to level 3. Level 3, step 3, you're going to just practice your turns. You want to turn away from your dog, which is the easiest turn. So if your dog is on your left-hand side, you're going to turn right. After turning away from your dog, you can turn in towards your dog, which is a lot harder. And you're going to mark and reinforce for that. Same thing, you're going to mark and you're going to reinforce right behind your left or right knee based on, where the dog's nose is. After you worked on turns, now this is where most people hang out. They hang out on level 1, step 1, 2, or 3. After that, then you can focus on, implementing a sit. So how we implement a sit is we'll walk, we'll say the word first, and then we'll stop moving. And then the moment the dog sits, we click and we reinforce where we want the dog to be. We also work on release. So we don't just say sit, click treat, and then start walking. We release the dog by saying, okay. Step 5, we get rid of saying the sit and we just don't say anything, but we stop. 99% of the time, the dog actually goes right into a sit because you just finished training it with the verbal sit. At that point, we start to add distractions. So we get the dog to go in the sit, and at the beginning, we pay them for that first sit, but then we pretend to move away without the release word. If each time you do that, you want to pay the dog, and that helps build that ability to stay there until released. This is useful if you're, at Home Depot and there's something that you want to get. You could put your dog in sit. You can take a few steps, reach for it, and say, okay, let's go. You want to have a good sit with distractions of things walking by, whether it's people, dogs, they need to be able to build that duration. I'm going to skip ahead on this, but this is the different ways that we teach heel. So we do a step back, quarter turn. Heel is basically a position that we teach. So we're just clicking and treating to get in the position. It doesn't mean they have to walk in that position. So we teach 3 different ways for heel. The other one is teaching the dog to go around and then getting into heel position. We do this using targeting. So the dog is targeted once they pass heel, and then your actual heel, and then we mark and reward on the other side. The third heel position that we teach is the same side heel, and you'll notice that I'm moving my left foot back along with my hand, and then I fade out my left foot. So it's just a finger cue, and then we turn it into a verbal pretty quickly. So there, I didn't move my foot, just used a hand targeting. So this dog has a really good hand target. So already, you notice that even before I moved my hand, the dog was already moving. We add duration to the heel. This is the one where we walk in heel position. So we use, it's really hard to explain online, but basically we hold our hand up, and when we click and the treat comes from the hand. So, and we let go of the leash every once in a while to resemble, like if you drop the leash, the dog stays in a heel position. So this isn't the formal competitive heel. This is more of like what we would implement for service animals, or if you're therapy and you're walking through the hospital, we'd want them to be pretty close by. If you're going down Main Street or Ocean Boulevard. So we're almost at the end. I'm going to talk about counter surfing. This is one that we got a lot of requests to talk about. So modifying unwanted behavior, first step is, how do I make the dog not practice this unwanted behavior? And that would mean putting up X pens and blah, blah, blah. So for counter surfing, you're going to block them from going on the counter, and you're not going to have stuff on the counter that would make them go onto the counter. Then you're going to say, what do I want my dog to do instead? In this case, for me and for my household, I have a dog bed that is right next to the kitchen. And I taught my dog to go, and I teach all of the board and trained dogs that they go to bed and stay there, and they get rewarded for being there instead of going into the kitchen and following me. So step one, you want to manage it. And then you want to ask yourself, what do I want my dog to do instead of counter surfing? Because I need to focus on that. Step two, you're going to train that new behavior, which in this case for counter surfing, I'm teaching go to bed. And then step three, I'm going to reinforce that. And then you can remove the pet gates and all of that. So here's a counter surfing video. So the alternative behavior is going to the bed. So my dog would get paid for going to the bed versus going on the counter or begging for food or following me into the kitchen. So those are the steps for modifying unwanted behavior. I think this is the very last video that I'm going to show, and the last topic that we're going to talk about is called the bucket game. I like this. I did this really early on with my own dog. The bucket game is a way for your dog to clearly communicate, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. If they want to take a break, they're going to tell you, hey, I need a break. When they're ready, they're going to tell you, I'm ready, go ahead. If they need you to slow down, they're going to tell you, hey, I need you to slow down right now. So the bucket game can be used for anything that requires you to touch your dog. So if you're administering medication, if you want to brush your dog's hair, brush their teeth, clean out their eyes, shots. You can also bring the bucket game into a grooming or a vet. It really helps build confidence in your dog, and it reduces any kind of fear and phobia because they're able to communicate and you listen. So this is one of my favorite games to implement in dog training. I highly recommend, if you haven't done so already, to go ahead and try this game. It's so easy to teach, and my dog gets brushed on a daily basis. So the bucket game is a way that I taught my dog to, hey, be calm, enjoy this. I can do my dog's nails. I've also groomed my own dog. I do, comb and brush, clean his ears, his teeth, his eyes, pretty much anything I want. He may not like it, but he is telling me, hey, I'm okay with it, I understand. It empowers your dog to talk to you. And here are some of the rules. So the very first step is getting your dog to even look at the bucket. So I'm stepped over to the side, but typically if I were to train this with a brand new dog, I would sit down, have the bucket in front of me, and I would be paying right in front. And my dog hasn't played this for like 4 or 5 years, so he was a little rusty at the beginning. So if the dog looks at the bucket, we mark and we pay from the bucket. So mark, reward for looking at the bucket. Step 1. We add duration by just waiting 1 or 2 1,000 for them looking at the bucket, mark, reward. So the food is going, the hand is going into the bucket, it's coming to their mouth. In my dog's case, I want him to put his chin down. That's not something that has to happen, but I want him to put his chin down and relax, and I'm marking that. It tells me that, hey, he's ready for whatever it is that I need to do. So that's his way of saying, I'm comfortable, go ahead, keep going. Step 3, you're going to want to move your hand towards your dog, but don't touch yet. So if he doesn't look at you, he stares at the bucket, you're good to keep going. You want to do a few repetitions here. In this case, I'm touching his body, but I do end up going to touch his ear, and I take the steps where I just kind of move towards his ear, and then I pull back and I pay. After you've done some pretend touches, now you're really going to touch your dog. So if you touch your dog and they look at you before you remove, your dog is telling you, hey, I'm kind of uncomfortable, please take a step back. You're going to honor that by pulling your hand away. When your dog is ready, they'll look back at the bucket, then you'll mark while you have your hand on them, and then they can remove their head and you can reward that. So in this case, I begin the grooming process, which I'm trying to comb his ears. So he puts his head down when he's ready, and I'm going through the steps nice and slow, like you should be. And, you know, maybe 1 or 2 strokes at a time. I mark yes, and then I reward, or I click and I treat. You can then begin to add a little more pressure or a little more duration based on what it is that you're doing. If you're administering shots, obviously it's just going to be one time and then done. But when you're combing or grooming a dog, you want them to be able to stay there relaxed for a long period of time. So you're going to probably add duration before you start adding a little bit more pressure. So I begin to add duration at level 6. And eventually your dog can just chill out there and wait. Again, if they lift their head up and look at you, that is their way of telling you, hey, I need a break. Okay. So I'm going to take a look and see if there's any questions. If you have any questions, I'll take a look. If not, end the session. So Casey, how much of that did you get to see?
Like none of it.
No worries.
No worries. Yeah, I was like, I don't want to text her because I don't know if she's like leading it. So I was like, I'll just leave it and whatever, I'll recap or something.
It's okay. So I'll try to share the link. Hopefully it really did get recorded so that I can share it a little bit later. But so we're done for now. I'll go ahead and stop sharing. We went through a lot today, so I'll try to kind of outline what we did so that people can kind of take a look at their own time. But this was a lot about everything, so hopefully it was useful. But if you can give me your feedback, if you did watch it or you get a chance to watch it, let me know if it was useful. So
Cool.
guys have a good evening. Let me see if I can get this up and running and be able to share the link a little later. All right.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
She ended.